Ashley Monroe felt the room turn against her before she even understood why. 1 second, she was standing alone with her champagne flute. The next, Brandon's voice sliced through the ballroom like a scalpel. "You look tired, Ashley." He aimed the words with the precision of someone who wanted them to hurt. The words hit harder than they should have, sharp enough to make the chandeliers blur, sharp enough to make the Atlanta Country Club's glittering perfection feel suddenly hostile. Conversations paused. Heads tilted. People listened without looking. Brandon didn't raise his voice. He never had to. He just leaned in, boutonniere perfectly straight, smile perfectly cruel. "I guess the tech world doesn't leave much time for maintenance." Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. She'd handled boardrooms full of men twice his age. She'd shut down hostile investors with nothing but logic. But this quiet public dismantling, was different. "You're a ghost at this wedding, Ashley," he murmured, breath brushing her ear. "Nobody here misses you." The room tilted. Her chest tightened. The champagne flute slipped slightly in her grip. And then, warmth. A hand settled at the small of her back. Heavy. Certain. Possessive in a way that made the air shift. "She isn't a ghost." The voice was low, calm, and dangerous enough to still the entire ballroom. "She's the sun. You're just the idiot who forgot to wear sunglasses." Ashley turned. Shin Ji-won stood beside her. Not the quiet boy from the big estate at the end of the road. Not the kid who used to wordlessly hand her band-aids when she scraped her knee. This man was something else entirely, tall, broad-shouldered, immaculate in a three-piece suit that looked like armor. His eyes were obsidian, unreadable, fixed on Brandon with the detached focus of someone assessing a threat. For the first time all night, Ashley wasn't alone. Brandon laughed, short and brittle. "And you are." Ji-won didn't look at him. Not immediately. His attention shifted to Ashley instead, gaze softening by a fraction, just enough that she noticed. Just enough that it felt like a secret meant only for her. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. The question shouldn't have undone her. It did. Ashley nodded, though her throat felt too tight to speak. Ji-won's jaw tightened in response, something dark flickering behind his eyes. Then finally, he looked at Brandon. "I'm her partner," Ji-won said. "Not date. Not friend. Partner." The word landed like a gauntlet thrown onto marble. "And you," Ji-won continued, his tone polite, almost bored, "are standing too close." Brandon's smirk faltered. Around them, conversations stalled. People watched now, no longer pretending not to. Whispers rippled through the room as recognition dawned, because everyone in Atlanta's upper circles knew the name Shin. Ashley felt it then. The shift in power. The way the room bent subtly toward the man at her side. Ji-won's hand remained at her back, steady and unyielding. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the shock and the disbelief, a far more dangerous realization took hold. Shin Ji-won hadn't stepped in to be polite. He'd stepped in to claim her. The word partner lingered in the air long after Shin Ji-won said it. Ashley felt it settle over the small cluster of people around them like a shift in pressure, subtle, unmistakable. Brandon's smile froze, just slightly, the way glass does right before it cracks. Conversations resumed in awkward fragments, but no one fully turned away. The room was watching now. Ji-won didn't move his hand from Ashley's back. Up close, the sensation was almost dizzying. His palm was warm, solid, anchoring her in place as if he'd drawn a boundary around her that the world had no permission to cross. She was suddenly acutely aware of how small she felt beside him, petite and soft against his height, her shoulder barely brushing his chest when she shifted. "Partner," Brandon repeated, eyebrows lifting. "That's serious language for a wedding +1. Ji-won's gaze flicked over him, cool and dismissive. "Is it?" he asked mildly. Ashley swallowed. Her heart was racing, but not from fear. From the way Ji-won's thumb pressed once, slow, deliberate, into the small of her back, a silent reassurance that sent an unexpected shiver through her. She cleared her throat. "Ji-won," she said, testing his name on her tongue. "I didn't know you were coming." "I wasn't," he replied, eyes still on Brandon. That earned a few murmurs. Brandon laughed again, sharper this time. "So you just happened to wander into a private country club wedding?" Ji-won finally looked at him properly. It wasn't anger. It was assessment. The kind of look Ashley had seen venture capitalists give founders they were about to crush in negotiations. Ji-won's eyes swept Brandon from polished shoes to smug expression and back again, calculating. I was invited, Ji-won said. But I came because Ashley was here. The words were simple. The effect was not. Ashley felt heat bloom in her cheeks. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the fact that this man, this impossibly intimidating, devastatingly attractive man, was still the boy who used to sit on the curb with her and trade fruit snacks after school. Brandon's jaw tightened. Funny. I don't remember you from our circle. You wouldn't, Ji-won said calmly. We don't run in the same one. That did it. Brandon stiffened, his eyes darting briefly around the room, toward guests who were suddenly very interested in their champagne flutes. Ashley felt something inside her loosen. For weeks, Brandon had controlled the narrative. The breakup. The whispers. The quiet pity. Now, for the first time, someone had stepped into the space beside her and tilted the entire room back in her favor. Ji-won leaned closer, his mouth near her ear. You okay? He murmured, low enough that only she could hear. She nodded, though her pulse was still racing. Yes. I just wasn't expecting you. A corner of his mouth lifted. That makes two of us. Music swelled as the band shifted into a new song. Guests drifted back toward the bar, the dance floor, safer conversations. Brandon lingered a second longer, clearly weighing his next move. We'll talk later, he said to Ashley, his tone edged with something that dared her to disagree. She won't, Ji-won said. Brandon scoffed, then turned and walked away, shoulders rigid. Ashley exhaled slowly, tension she hadn't realized she was holding draining from her body. She turned fully toward Ji-won for the first time, really looked at him. He was overwhelming. Tall and broad-shouldered, his suit perfectly tailored to a body that looked less sculpted by a gym and more by discipline. His hair was dark and neatly styled, his jaw shadowed with the faintest hint of stubble. Everything about him spoke of control, money, power, restraint. And yet, when his eyes met hers, something softened. Hi, she said faintly. Hi, Ashley. Hearing her name from his mouth did something strange to her chest. They stood there for a beat too long. Ji-won seemed to realize it at the same time she did. His hand slipped away from her back, slowly, reluctantly, as if he were forcing himself to give her space. Do you want to sit? He asked. Or leave? Leave. The word sent a spark through her. The idea of walking out, of choosing to leave instead of enduring, was intoxicating. I can't, she said. It's my friend's wedding. Ji-won inclined his head. Then we stay. We. He gestured toward a quieter corner of the reception hall, away from Brandon's orbit. As they walked, Ashley became painfully aware of how many eyes followed them. Whispers rippled in their wake. People are staring, she murmured. They will, Ji-won replied. They always do. She glanced up at him. You're known. That's one word for it. They stopped near a tall cocktail table. Ji-won pulled out a chair for her, an old-fashioned deliberate gesture that made her stomach flip, then took the seat beside her instead of across, his knee angled toward hers. So, she said, trying for lightness and failing. What are you doing in Atlanta? He studied her for a moment, as if deciding how much truth to offer. Business. Of course. And you? He asked. Last I heard, you were on the West Coast. I am, she said. Mostly. She hesitated, fingers tightening around her glass. My company moved me back here for a few months. A big client needed hands-on support. His gaze sharpened, just slightly. And the wedding, she added quickly. And the breakup. Her breath caught. You know about that? Yes. There was no apology in his tone. No embarrassment. Just certainty. Ashley's fingers tightened in her lap. How? Ji-won leaned back slightly, eyes never leaving hers. You're not invisible, Ashley. You never were. The words settled heavy between them. I didn't realize you'd be at this wedding. The groom's brother is a business associate, Ji-won said. I wasn't planning to attend. His gaze flicked to her, softer for a heartbeat. But my men showed me the guest list. I saw your name. He paused, letting the weight of that settle. Once I confirmed it was you, and that you were here alone, I decided to come. You came because of me? Ji-won's eyes held hers for a long, steady moment, long enough that she felt the air shift again, tighter, warmer. Of course I came because of you. Her voice sounded too small, even to her own ears. His voice was low, almost gentle, but there was nothing soft about the certainty in it. I saw your name, Ashley. A beat. And I remembered the girl who never deserved to stand alone in any room. Her breath caught. Ji-won stepped just a fraction closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him along her side. So I came. Another beat, deeper this time. To make sure you weren't. A server approached, flustered, offering drinks. Ji-won ordered without asking, something dark and expensive for himself, champagne for Ashley. Normally, that might have annoyed her. Tonight, it felt comforting. Like being handled by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. When the server left, Ashley let out a quiet laugh. You always did that. Did what? Paid attention, she said, even when you pretended not to. A flicker of something crossed his face, nostalgia perhaps. Or regret. You were loud enough for both of us, he said. She smiled, genuine this time. You used to scare the other kids. They deserved it. Her smile widened. Then it faltered as a familiar weight returned to her chest. You didn't have to step in back there, she said softly. I could have handled him. Ji-won's jaw tightened. I know. Then why? Because you shouldn't have to, he interrupted, voice still calm but edged with steel. Not anymore. Ashley's pulse jumped. She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped when she felt it, the way the air shifted again. Brandon stood across the room, watching them. His expression was darker now, sharper. Calculating. Ji-won followed her gaze. Something in him changed instantly. His posture straightened, his presence sharpening like a blade drawn halfway from its sheath. He leaned in, his voice low. Stay with me tonight. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a plea. It was a promise. Ashley looked at him, at the man he'd become, at the quiet danger wrapped in impeccable control, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She nodded. Ji-won's eyes darkened. Good, he said. Because I don't intend to let you out of my sight. Across the room, Brandon raised his glass in a mock toast. Ji-won didn't look away from Ashley as he lifted his own. And Ashley had the sudden electrifying sense that this reunion wasn't an accident at all. It was the beginning of something that had been waiting for her all along. The band shifted into a slower rhythm, something smooth and nostalgic that carried easily over the low murmur of conversation. Glasses clinked. Laughter rose and fell. So, Ashley said quietly, lifting her champagne. You're terrifying. A ghost of a smile touched Ji-won's mouth. Only when necessary. She glanced at him sideways. You didn't used to be like this. I was, he replied. You just didn't know where to look. That sent a strange warmth through her chest, equal parts flattered and unsettled. She took a sip to hide it, the bubbles sharp against her tongue. The ceremony was already over. Rings exchanged. Applause spent. The newlyweds had disappeared upstairs to change. An elegant pause before the send-off, a soft hour where champagne flowed and reputations were quietly measured. The band played something old and smooth. Guests loosened ties. Laughter came easier now that the sacred part of the night was done. Ashley felt the shift the moment it happened. Not the music. Not the lights. The room. She sensed eyes sliding toward her and Ji-won, curiosity sharpening into speculation. He stood beside her near the edge of the ballroom, jacket buttoned, posture easy but alert. He hadn't touched her again, not since earlier, but his presence remained like a wall at her back, solid and unmistakable. You okay? He asked low. Yes, she said, though her pulse still hadn't settled. I think so. He studied her for a beat, as if testing the truth of that answer, then inclined his head. Good. Across the room, Brandon reappeared. He traded his earlier smugness for something tighter, more controlled. His shoulders were squared, his smile carefully reconstructed. He moved through the crowd with purpose, shaking hands, clapping backs, reclaiming space the way men like him always did. Ashley felt her stomach knot. Ji-won noticed instantly. He's planning something, she murmured. Yes, Ji-won said, eyes tracking Brandon with cool precision. He is. Before Ashley could ask how he knew, a sharp tap echoed through the room. Brandon stood at the edge of the dance floor, microphone in hand, the MC smiling uncertainly beside him. Sorry to interrupt, Brandon said, his voice amplified and pleasant. But I just wanted to say a few words. Ashley's pulse spiked. She felt it in her wrists, her throat, the hollow beneath her ribs. The crowd quieted, attention drawn forward. Brandon cleared his throat, glancing briefly, deliberately, toward Ashley. Ashley felt heat creep up her neck. She didn't look at Brandon. She focused on the condensation sliding down her glass, the steady rise and fall of Ji-won's breathing beside her. Brandon continued, voice smooth. Tonight is about love. About commitment. About knowing when you've found the right partner, and when it's better to walk away from something that only looks good from the outside. There it was. The room leaned in without meaning to. Ashley felt the familiar pull to stay poised, to absorb and smile and survive. She inhaled slowly. I just want to say, Brandon continued, how grateful I am to be here tonight, celebrating love, commitment, and the kind of partnership that lasts. A few polite chuckles rippled through the room. It's especially meaningful for those of us who learned what doesn't work before finding what does. Brandon smiled wider. Some relationships look perfect on paper. Ambitious. Impressive. But sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you realize the spark just isn't there. And it's better to let go than pretend. The words were honeyed. Poisoned. Ji-won stepped forward. He didn't take the microphone. He didn't raise his voice. He simply spoke. I agree, he said, calm enough to quiet the room on instinct alone. Walking away from what drains you is a form of wisdom. Brandon faltered, just slightly. I was just, Ji-won held up one finger. Not aggressive. Just, final. This evening is about celebrating a marriage, Ji-won continued. So I'll keep this brief. He turned, not toward Brandon, but toward Ashley. And the room followed his gaze. Ashley didn't lose a fiancé, he said evenly. She chose not to marry a man who mistakes cruelty for confidence. Silence. It wasn't the shocked kind. It was the kind that settled in slowly, heavy and undeniable. Ashley felt it ripple outward, felt people recalibrate, felt the balance tilt. Ji-won didn't elaborate. He didn't explain. He didn't threaten. He simply reached for Ashley. His hand came to rest at her back, firm and unmistakable, placing her not behind him, but beside him. Equal. Chosen. I respect that choice, he added. And I stand by it. That was all. He nodded once to the room, a courteous dismissal, then turned and guided Ashley back toward their place near the wall. Applause began, hesitant at first, then growing as social instinct took over, people clapping because someone had to break the tension. Ashley sat down slowly, heart racing. Across the room, Brandon stood frozen, microphone still in hand. His smile was gone now, replaced by something raw and confused. He ignored it. Ashley noticed anyway. Ji-won's thumb pressed gently at her back, grounding. Breathe, he murmured. She did. In. Out. The band resumed. Conversation returned in cautious waves. But the atmosphere had changed. Brandon was no longer the center of gravity. He was an object people looked around. Ashley felt steady. Not vindicated. Not triumphant. Seen. She turned to Ji-won, lowering her voice. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, he replied simply. Why? His eyes held hers, dark and unflinching. Because no one speaks about you like that. Not in public. Not ever. Her chest tightened. You don't even know what we were. I know what he did, Ji-won said. And I know what you deserve. The newlyweds re-entered to cheers moments later, the room re-anchoring itself to celebration. Ashley stood with everyone else, clapping, smiling, really smiling this time. The applause for the newlyweds hadn't fully faded when Ashley felt it again. That prickle at the back of her neck. The sense of being watched. She lowered her hands slowly, smile still fixed in place as the couple laughed their way through hugs and well wishes. Champagne flowed. Music swelled. The room tried to reassemble itself around joy. But Brandon stood apart from it now. Near the hallway that led to the private suites. Waiting. Ashley's pulse stumbled. She shifted her weight, instinctively angling closer to Ji-won. He noticed immediately. His head tilted just enough to catch her line of sight. Don't, he said quietly. She frowned. Don't what? Don't go alone. I just need the restroom, she replied, not quite meeting his eyes. She hated that this was still happening, that Brandon could still reach into her chest and twist something small and panicked. Ji-won studied her face. His jaw tightened. I'll walk you, he said. I know, he interrupted gently. I'm still walking you. There was no argument left in her. She nodded. They moved through the thinning crowd together, his presence creating a subtle corridor of space. As they reached the hallway, Ashley felt the air change, cooler, quieter, the muffled music dulled by thick doors and dark wood paneling. Thank you, she murmured as they reached the restroom entrance. Ji-won's gaze swept the corridor once, sharp and assessing. I'll be right here. She hesitated, then went inside. The mirror reflected a woman she barely recognized, cheeks flushed, eyes bright, something alive and electric under her skin. She braced her hands on the counter and took a breath. Get it together, she told herself. When she stepped back into the hallway, Ji-won wasn't there. Her heart lurched. Ji-won, she called softly. A shadow detached itself from the far end of the corridor. Brandon. He moved quickly, blocking her path before she could retreat. The polite mask was gone now, stripped away to reveal something raw and ugly underneath. There you are, he said, voice low. Running off already? Ashley stiffened. Move. He laughed under his breath. You think you can just rewrite history because some rich guy plays hero for a night? Get out of my way, she repeated, firmer now. Brandon stepped closer. Too close. You don't get to humiliate me and walk away like you've won. You were nothing without me, Ashley. You still are. Her chest tightened. She tried to sidestep him. He grabbed her arm. Not hard. Not yet. But possessive. Familiar. Enough to make her stomach drop. Don't, she said sharply, trying to pull free. His grip tightened. See? This is what you do. You pretend you're strong, but you've always needed someone. The sound of footsteps was the only warning he got. In one smooth, terrifying movement, Brandon was wrenched backward and slammed against the mahogany wall. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs. Ji-won's forearm pressed across his throat, pinning him effortlessly, his other hand braced beside Brandon's head. Ashley gasped. Ji-won leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper so calm it was almost unreal. You touched her. Brandon choked, hands scrabbling uselessly at Ji-won's arm. Ji-won didn't raise his voice, didn't tighten his grip further. He didn't need to. I spent 15 years learning how to erase problems without leaving fingerprints, Ji-won said softly. So listen carefully. He said it like a fact, not a confession, as if this was simply the world he came from. Ashley stood frozen, heart hammering, torn between fear and something darker, something electric, watching Ji-won like this. If you speak to her again, Ji-won continued, if you stand within reach of her again, I will dismantle everything attached to your name. Slowly. Quietly. Until the only record you leave behind is a cautionary tale. Brandon's eyes widened in real, dawning terror. Ji-won leaned closer. Do you understand me? Brandon nodded frantically. Ji-won released him. Brandon staggered back, coughing, pressing himself against the wall as if it might swallow him. He didn't look at Ashley again. He fled down the corridor, footsteps uneven, dignity shredded. Silence rushed in to fill the space he left behind. Ashley's knees went weak. Ji-won turned to her instantly. Are you hurt? He asked, all the steel draining from his voice. She shook her head, breath shaky. No. He grabbed me. Ji-won's gaze dropped to her arm. His hand hovered there for a fraction of a second, as if asking permission. When she didn't pull away, he cupped her elbow gently, reverently, checking for bruises. His touch was careful now. Controlled. Nothing like what she'd just witnessed. He touched you, he said again, quieter this time. Why did you ever let him touch you? The question wasn't accusation. It was anguish. Ashley's throat burned. Because I thought that was what love looked like, she whispered. Because I didn't know better. Ji-won's jaw clenched. He closed his eyes briefly, as if steadying himself. I should have been there, he said. She looked up at him, startled. What? I knew about him, Ji-won admitted. I knew he didn't deserve you. Her heart skipped. How could you know? Because I watched, he said. From a distance. Longer than you think. That landed harder than any threat. You've been watching me? She asked. Yes. There was no shame in his voice. No apology. Just truth. I didn't interfere, he continued. Because you chose your life. And I respected that. But the moment I saw him speak to you tonight like you were small, his voice darkened. That restraint ended. Ashley searched his face, fear and heat tangling together inside her. That wasn't protection, she said slowly. That was something else. Ji-won met her gaze. Yes. The admission hung between them, heavy and charged. I don't belong in your world, she said, though the words felt thinner than before. Ji-won stepped closer, not crowding her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him again. His voice dropped, intimate. You belong wherever you decide to stand, he said. I'm only asking you not to stand alone. She should have stepped back. She didn't. Outside, engines purred softly. A door opened somewhere nearby. Ji-won glanced down the corridor, then back at her. Come with me, he said. Now. Not a command. An invitation. Ashley took a breath. Thought of Brandon's grip. Thought of the way Ji-won's hand had hovered, waiting. She nodded. Ji-won turned, guiding her toward the exit. Outside, black SUVs waited in quiet formation, headlights slicing through the night. The formation wasn't accidental, it was protection protocol. As he opened the door for her, Ashley felt the last fragile thread tying her to the evening snap. She stepped inside. And as the door closed behind her, sealing her into the quiet power of Ji-won's world, she knew, whatever she had just agreed to, there was no turning back. Ji-won walked her to her door. Not inside. Not even close enough that the heat of him pressed into her. He stopped a step back, hands loose at his sides, posture relaxed in a way that felt deliberate rather than casual. The street was quiet. Ordinary. A neighbor's porch light flickered across the sidewalk. Somewhere nearby, a television laughed. Normal life. Ashley's heart was still racing. Dinner, Ji-won said. A proper one. No crowds. No performances. She waited for the rest. For the expectation. For the unspoken after. It didn't come. I don't want tonight deciding anything, he added, voice steady. I want you clear-headed. The restraint unsettled her more than the intensity had. Yes, she said finally. I'd like that. He nodded once, like a promise accepted. Then he stepped back, giving her space, letting the moment end without touching it further. Ashley went inside with the echo of him still humming in her veins, realizing that for the first time in weeks, no one had demanded anything of her. They dated. Properly. Dinner stretched into long conversations that didn't circle but cut straight through, her company, his business without details, ambition without apology. Ji-won listened with a stillness that made her feel examined, not judged. When he laughed, it surprised her every time. When he touched her, it was brief and exact, a hand at her lower back guiding her through a doorway, his fingers brushing hers when he passed her a glass. He never stayed late. Never crossed the threshold. Never tested how far she'd let him go. For a little while, life felt steady again, almost normal. And that was exactly when the cracks began to show. Weeks passed after the wedding, enough time for Brandon's fear to fade into arrogance. Enough time for him to convince himself that Ji-won's threat had been nothing more than theatrics, and enough time for him to start plotting. Ashley didn't notice it at first. She was busy settling into her temporary Atlanta assignment, juggling a major client her company had trusted her with. Losing them wasn't an option, not when her boss had vouched for her relocation, not when she was trying to rebuild her reputation after the breakup. Then the emails started. Confusing requests. Contradictory feedback. Sudden dissatisfaction from a client who had been perfectly happy for months. Her boss began checking in more often. Asking questions. Watching her a little too closely. Ashley brushed it off as stress, until the day everything snapped. The client walked into the office with Brandon at his side. Her blood ran cold. The client made a scene in front of her boss, complaining loudly about her unresponsiveness, her lack of professionalism, her poor communication. None of it was true. All of it landed. Her boss's expression tightened. Her stomach dropped. When the meeting ended, Brandon lingered in the hallway, leaning against the wall with a smile that made her skin crawl. Later that afternoon, her phone buzzed. Brandon, you're going to lose that client. And your job. Unless you fix what you broke. Ashley stared at the screen, pulse thudding. Ashley, what do you want? His reply came instantly. Brandon, an apology. On your knees. In front of everyone who watched you humiliate me. Her breath caught. He wasn't bluffing, she could see it now. He'd used his connections to poison her client relationship. He'd orchestrated the entire thing. And he wasn't done. Within hours, she started hearing whispers. Their old friend group, the ones who had quietly taken Brandon's side after the breakup, were buzzing. Brandon had told them she was going to apologize. That she'd finally realized her mistake. That she'd kneel in front of all of them at a get-together he'd arranged. He wanted her small. He wanted her humiliated. He wanted to undo the moment Ji-won had stood beside her. Ashley felt sick. She didn't tell Ji-won, not at first. She didn't want to drag him into the mess. Didn't want him to think she couldn't handle her own life. But Ji-won noticed the shift in her immediately. The tension in her shoulders. The way she stared at her phone. The way her smile didn't reach her eyes. He didn't press. He simply watched, and waited. It happened on a Tuesday. Ji-won was in a glass-walled conference room overlooking downtown Atlanta, reviewing a contract with Min Jae, the groom's brother, his business associate. They were discussing a potential investment when Min Jae laughed lightly and said, "By the way, that guy from the wedding, Brandon? He's been running his mouth." Ji-won didn't look up from the document. About what? Not a question. A temperature check. Min Jae shrugged. Some nonsense about making Ashley apologize to him. Publicly. Said he's organizing a whole thing with their old friend group. Ji-won's pen paused mid-stroke. Min Jae kept talking, oblivious. He's also been stirring trouble with one of her clients. I heard he knows someone on their board. Messy situation. Ji-won closed the folder. We'll continue this later. He stood. Calm. Controlled. Min Jae blinked. Everything okay? Ji-won didn't answer. He was already gone. And from that moment, Brandon's countdown began. Brandon booked a private room at a trendy Buckhead restaurant. He sent out invites. He bragged in the group chat. Then 2 days before, the restaurant canceled. The manager refused to explain. The group chat went silent. Brandon's calls went unanswered. He blamed the restaurant. He blamed the staff. He blamed bad luck. He never once considered the truth. It started small. A deal he'd been counting on evaporated overnight. A mentor cut ties without explanation. A rumor spread about financial misconduct. His access to certain circles vanished. These weren't coincidences. They were the kind of quiet corrections that happened when someone with reach decided a line had been crossed. Ashley heard whispers among the friend group, nothing concrete, just murmurs. She didn't connect them to Ji-won. Not yet. Then things escalated. Brandon's car was keyed. His apartment was broken into, nothing stolen, just destroyed. He started showing up to work late, shaken, paranoid. The way people spoke about Brandon now, carefully, as if he'd become contagious. Ashley still didn't put the pieces together. Not until the night everything finally broke. It was late when she left the office, the sky dimming to violet. She stepped onto the sidewalk, and froze. Someone was kneeling on the pavement. Clothes dirty. Face bruised. Eyes hollow. Brandon. He crawled toward her. Ashley, please. Her breath caught. Brandon? What happened to you? He grabbed her wrist with trembling fingers. Make it stop. Please. I'm sorry. I'll apologize. I'll disappear. Just, please, tell him to stop. Her stomach dropped. Tell who? He sobbed. Ji-won. I know it's him. I know what he is. Please, please, just tell him I'm done. Before she could respond, he staggered away, disappearing into the night. Ashley stood frozen, heart pounding. And slowly, painfully, the pieces began to click. Fear crept in slowly, winding itself around desire until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. If Ji-won could dismantle a man's life this quietly, without raising his voice, without touching him again, what did that make him? And what did it make her to be falling for him? She didn't sleep. By morning, she knew she had to face him. She went to see him without warning. Ji-won let her in without question. His home was controlled, immaculate, all glass and shadow and city lights spread beneath them like a living thing. It didn't feel warm. It felt intentional. She didn't sit. Is what's happening to Brandon because of you? She asked. Ji-won didn't pretend to misunderstand. Yes. The simplicity of it stole her breath. All of it, she pressed. Yes. Why? Her voice was steady, but it cost her something. Ji-won studied her face. Not guilty. Not defensive. Just calm. He spoke with the calm certainty of someone used to being obeyed long before anyone questioned him. He ignored my warning. The words settled heavy and frightening between them. Ashley wrapped her arms around herself. Do you hear how that sounds? I do. She stepped closer. Ji-won, he came to my office crawling. He looked terrified. He showed himself in front of you again. A beat. Even if it was to beg. Her breath hitched. Ji-won, what does that mean? He moved toward her, slow, deliberate. It means he chose to test me twice. Her pulse hammered. Ji-won, he reached for his jacket. I have to take care of him permanently. Her heart stopped. He stepped past her. She grabbed his arm. Ji-won. No. He turned, eyes dark, unreadable. Ashley. Let go. She didn't. Her fingers tightened. Her voice broke. Please don't. Ji-won didn't move. Her hand was still wrapped around his arm, small and shaking, but the grip was iron. He looked down at her fingers, then at her face, pale, wide-eyed, terrified for reasons that had nothing to do with Brandon. A muscle in his jaw ticked. Not anger, restraint. You don't understand what he's done. Her breath hitched. Then explain it to me. He exhaled once, slow, controlled. He tried to humiliate you publicly. Twice. She swallowed hard. Ji-won, he interfered with your work. A beat. He put your career at risk. Her fingers tightened. I know. But his eyes darkened. He touched you. The words landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Ashley's breath stuttered. She remembered the hallway. Brandon's hand on her arm. The panic. The helplessness. Ji-won stepped closer, lowering his voice. I warned him once. He chose to test me again. She shook her head, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. Ji-won, you can't just, I can. His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. Her heart pounded. Please, she whispered. Don't do this. For the first time, something flickered in his expression, not anger, not coldness. Hurt. Ashley, he made you afraid. Her throat tightened. I'm afraid now, she said. Of you. That stopped him. Completely. His breath caught, barely, but she saw it. His posture shifted, the lethal stillness cracking just enough to reveal something raw underneath. He looked at her like she'd reached into his chest and pulled something loose. You're afraid of me. Not a question. A realization. She nodded, tears slipping free. Not because you'd hurt me, she said, but because you'd hurt someone else. For me. Silence stretched between them, heavy, trembling, electric. Ji-won lowered his gaze, jaw tight, breathing slow and deliberate. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Not cold. Not controlled. Human. Ashley. I don't know how to be anything else. Her breath broke. Then learn, she whispered. With me. He closed his eyes for a moment, a long, shuddering moment, as if fighting something inside himself. When he opened them again, the decision was there. Clear. Painful. Absolute. He reached up, gently covering her hand where it still held his arm. If you ask me not to go, he said quietly, I won't. Her heart twisted. I'm asking. Ji-won exhaled, the tension draining from his shoulders like a tide pulling back. He stepped away from the door. Away from the darkness. Toward her. Then it's done, he said. He's done. Ashley didn't know whether he meant Brandon was safe. Or that Brandon no longer mattered. But Ji-won stayed. Is this how you deal with your problems, Ji-won? She asked softly. And if one day you decide I'm a problem? Her voice trembled. Who would protect me from you? That made him still. I would never hurt you. He didn't hesitate. Didn't soften it. You could never be a problem to eliminate. Then he gave her the only thing that mattered. An out. But this is who I am, Ashley. I protect what's mine, and I don't do half measures. In my world, actions have consequences. The message has to stay clear. My people are untouchable. The moment that message blurs, dangerous men start to believe they can test me. He held her gaze. I can understand if all of this is too intense for you. So if you leave tonight, it ends cleanly. I won't follow. I won't interfere. You keep your life exactly as it is. The silence stretched. Ashley felt the weight of the choice settle into her bones. This wasn't about Brandon anymore. This was about what it meant to choose a man no one could stop, and to do so willingly. She stepped closer. I don't want safety that costs me my freedom, she said. And I don't want desire that pretends it isn't dangerous. Ji-won searched her face, as if testing the resolve beneath the words. I choose you, she said, knowing exactly who you are. He reached for her slowly, giving her time to pull back. When she didn't, he cupped her face with a care that felt almost reverent. The kiss was unhurried, deepening only when she leaned in, controlled, intentional, anchored in choice rather than hunger. They took their time, crossing the rest of the distance. When they finally moved to the bedroom, the intimacy shifted, deeper, slower, consuming without being rushed. Ji-won's attention never wavered, every touch deliberate, every pause a question she answered with her body. Ashley felt claimed not through force, but through presence, through being seen and received fully. Morning found the city pale and quiet beneath the glass. Ashley woke with Ji-won's arm heavy at her waist, his thumb tracing a slow, absent line along her hip, grounding her. No fear tightened her chest. No doubt pressed in. She didn't know what choosing him would cost her in the long run. But she knew this, she had chosen him with her eyes open. And he had let her. 6 months later, Atlanta glowed beneath a winter-soft sky. Ashley stood barefoot at the glass wall of Ji-won's penthouse, a mug of coffee warming her hands, the city spread out below in quiet early morning motion. Traffic hummed far beneath her. Office towers blinked awake one window at a time. It still amazed her how familiar this view felt now. How steady. Behind her, Ji-won moved with the same quiet certainty he always had in the mornings. Jacket off. Shirt sleeves rolled. He relaxed only here, in this space with her. He pressed a slow kiss to the back of her shoulder, his hand settling at her waist like it had always belonged there. You'll be late, he murmured. Your team has that morning check-in. She smiled into her coffee. You memorized my schedule again. I learned quickly, he said, a faint smile in his voice. Your time is not negotiable. That had been the difference. Her life hadn't shrunk inside his world, it had stabilized. Strengthened. Her boss trusted her again. The client she'd nearly lost was now one of her strongest accounts. And every step of rebuilding had been hers. No interference. No pressure. Ji-won had drawn a line and kept it. She turned studying him, the man who had once terrified her with the scale of his power, and then proven day after day that restraint was his truest strength. The danger was still there. She'd never asked him to be less. She'd only asked him to never make her smaller. He never had. On the console table behind her sat a framed photograph from a wedding long ago, two people caught mid-laugh, her hand in his, the world paused around them. The night everything changed. The night she chose him with her eyes open. Any more weddings on the calendar? Ji-won asked lightly. Ashley laughed, stepping into his arms. No. I think the message landed. He brushed his thumb over the place on her arm where another man had once tried to leave a mark. There was nothing there now, no bruise, no memory that hurt. Just warmth. Just certainty. Good, Ji-won said. I prefer our life quiet. She tilted her head, meeting his gaze. Quiet for us, she corrected. Formidable for everyone else. His smile deepened, sharp, proud, unmistakably hers. Outside, the city surged forward. Inside, the world was steady. His world still existed, in shadows, in whispers, in the way people stepped aside when he entered a room, but it never touched her without her permission. Ashley rested her forehead against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, strong and unyielding. She hadn't traded her freedom for safety. She'd built something rarer. A life where power bowed to choice. A love that never asked her to disappear. A future she shaped with her own hands, and a man who stood beside her, not in front of her. And for the first time, Ashley knew, without fear, without doubt, this was home.